For the love of man. John Thornton saved Buck. Buck's strength came back to him slowly. Buck watched the running water, listened to the song of birds and the noise of nature. His wounds started to heal. Buck had a wonderful rest. Once Buck, John Thornton, Skeet and Nig waited for the raft which would carry them down to Dawson. Skeet was a little Irish setter. Skeet made friends with Buck. She cleaned Buck's wounds when he was very weak. Nig was a huge black dog. Nig had kind eyes and a friendly nature. These dogs did not show any jealousy toward Buck. They shared the kindness of John Thornton. Buck became stronger. He started to join all the games between Skeet and Nig. These games gave Buck the most perfect feeling and pushed him to start a new life. Buck had love for the first time. He never felt this love at Judge Miller's house in the sunny Santa Clara Valley. It was just a big friendship. John Thornton was the reason for all the love in Buck's heart. Firstly, he saved his life. And that was something. Secondly, he was a perfect master. Thornton saw Buck as his own child. He never forgot to say a kind word to Buck. He always played with him gladly. Buck was very happy when his master embraced him tightly. At that moment he was the happiest dog. Buck showed his love and adoration. He became wild when Thornton stroked him. But he also adored him from a distance. Buck could look at his master's face for hours. Buck's heart shone brightly. Buck did not like to lose sight of John Thornton. He could not believe in a constant master. He did not want Thornton to leave his life. Even at night Buck had this fear. But still Buck was a thing of the wild. He had no mercy. He had to be a leader who could kill. Buck connected the past with the present. He sat by John Thornton's fire. But behind him there were the shadows of the wild wolves. These shadows made him hear a call deep in the forest. But again and again the love for John Thornton drew him back to the fire. Only Thornton held him. The rest of mankind was nothing to Buck. One day Thornton's partners, Hans and Pete, came on the boat. Buck understood that they were Thornton's close friends. And he met them in a passive way. Later Buck learned that they were the same as Thornton. Thornton's partners also lived close to the earth, thought simply and saw everything clearly. They understood Buck and his manners. Buck's love for Thornton became even bigger. The greatest thing for Buck was Thornton's command. One day the men and dogs sat on the top of a cliff. Thornton sat near the edge. Buck was close to his shoulder. Thornton wanted to show his partners the experiment he had in mind. "Jump, Buck," said Thornton. The next moment he fought with Buck on the edge of a cliff. Hans and Pete tried to pull them back to safety. "It is scary," said Pete. "No, it is wonderful and dangerous at the same time. You know, sometimes it makes me afraid," said Thornton. "I do not want to fight with you when Buck is around," said Pete. "I do not either," said Hans. In Circle City they started to understand what Buck would do to protect his master. Once Black Burton picked a quarrel with a newcomer at the bar. Thornton tried to calm them down. At that time Buck laid in a corner and watched his master. Suddenly Burton struck out Thornton on the shoulder. Then people heard a loud roar from the corner. Buck tried to bite Burton's throat. The crowd tried to push Buck backward and calm him down. Later they let him go to his master. From that day Buck had a reputation. Everyone in Alaska knew his name. Another time Buck saved John Thornton's life again. It happened when the three partners were bringing a long boat down the bad rapids. Hans and Pete moved along the bank. Thornton was in the boat. Buck was on the bank and watched his master closely. Suddenly Thornton's boat overturned. John Thornton went towards the worst rapids. The stream was very fast. Buck jumped quickly into the water. He quickly caught his master. But the stream was too fast, and Thornton knew that. Thornton clutched the top of a rock with both his hands. Then he released Buck. "Go! Go, Buck!" he shouted. Buck could not hold himself. He threw his head high out of the water and turned toward the bank. Pete and Hans took Buck ashore from the wild stream. They had to be fast to save Thornton. They attached a long rope to Buck's neck and threw him into the stream. Buck was able to reach Thornton with the rope around his neck, Thornton held the rope very strongly. Pete and Hans pulled Thornton out of the stream. And he tried to breathe slowly. Thornton said something. But they could not make out the words. First, he looked at Buck, and then he stood up slowly on his feet. Later he examined Buck and found 3 broken ribs. That is all. We camp here, said Thornton. That winter, at Dawson, Buck showed his bravery. That bravery made him even more famous in Alaska. John Thornton talked with 2 men in the El Dorado saloon. Men said only the best things about their dogs. Buck was the main subject of their talk. One man said that his dog could start a sled with 500 pounds and walk with it. Another man said 700 for his dog. Buck can start 1,000 pounds, said Thornton. And walk with it for 100 yards, asked Mathewson. And start a sled, and walk with it for 100 yards, said John Thornton. Well, I have $1,000 that says he cannot do this, said Mathewson. Nobody spoke. Thornton did not think before he spoke. He had a real belief in Buck's strength. But he never tested it before. Besides, he and his partners did not have $1,000. Everyone looked at him. My sled is outside now. It should not stop you, said Mathewson. Thornton did not answer. He did not know what to say. He looked at the men around him. Can you lend me 1,000? Thornton asked. One of the men. Sure. But I do not believe that your dog can do this, said one of the men. The El Dorado saloon was empty. All the people went into the street. They wanted to see the test. Several hundred people stood around the sled. Mathewson loaded his sled with 1,000 pounds of flour. Thornton had doubt in his face. But his fighting spirit was still present. He called Hans and Pete to him. They had only $200. Thornton put Buck into the sled. Buck felt that he must do a great thing for John Thornton. He was in perfect condition at that moment. I offered you 800 for him before the test. 800 just as he stands, said a member of the latest dynasty, a king of the Skookum benches. Thornton shook his head. He came closer to Buck. The crowd was silent. Everybody knew that Buck was a good animal. But 1,000 pounds was too much in their eyes. Thornton took Buck's head into his 2 hands. As you love me, Buck. As you love me, said Thornton. The crowd watched the test seriously. Buck pressed his master's hand lightly in his teeth and released it slowly. It was the answer of his love. Now, Buck, said John Thornton. Buck tightened the traces. The load shook. Haw, cried Thornton. The sled moved forward. The men held their breath. Now. Mush. Thornton's command was like a pistol shot for Buck. Buck moved forward inch by inch. Then the sled moved. The men began to breathe again. Thornton ran up to Buck. He said many kind words. Buck walked for 100 yards with the heavy sled. God! I will give you 1,000, 1,200 for him, said the Skookum bench king. Thornton stood up. His eyes were wet. You can go to hell, answered Thornton. Buck pressed Thornton's hand in his teeth. He was very happy.